All right, so good to see you. Welcome aboard 2019 Kansas City Chiefs offseason. Today we're going to focus on the defense. The reason for that being Brett Veach has made so many changes to this defense during this offseason. Not surprising, they've had two back-to-back years now, finishing either last or almost dead last, basically in the entire NFL on defense. Last year, during the 2018 offseason, they really started this. We talked about that. It was really phase one of what will be three phases of changing this defense. So they won't be complete even after everything is said and done this year. You'll have to look at some more changes in 2020. And even after that, you've got to maintain the thing. But I think it's a three-year deal that they've got, and this is phase two of really trying to make that defense better. This is going to be one of those rare videos in which I don't talk much about money. You know, most of the time we're talking about the cap, we're talking about value, we're talking about how much a player has and how much dead cap is going to be issued if they cut him or let him go or trade him or things like that. We're not going to talk much about money today. I'm really just focusing at the defense, where the weak spots are, where the strong spots are, where you've made changes at, and so we're going to take a look at that today. When you look at the defense today, just so I can explain a couple of things, this is going to be the strong side of the defense today. This will be the weak side. When you look at these numbers, these are just some silly little grading system that have come out. If you don't like the grading system, that's fine. I'm not worried about it. It's just something that you can take a look at to see the strong points of the defense. For instance, Chris Jones, I think he's an elite player. I've given him a tier 1 grade. I think he's the only elite player on the Chiefs defense as of right now. When you move up here to Tyrann Mathieu, I've given him a tier 2 grade. For me, that's the kind of a player who is a no-doubt starter. You feel very good about him starting. Nobody's going to take that starting position away from him. And that particular player, whoever it is who gets a tier 2 grade, has a chance, a consistent chance of making Pro Bowls year in and year out. Maybe not every season, but quite a few seasons. A grade 3 player like Bashaud Breeland, and we'll get to all these guys later in just a minute. A grade 3 player is somebody who I think is a guy who's pretty much guaranteed to hold down that starting spot. That's why you pay the guy. I think that he's pretty much guaranteed to hold down the starting spot, but he's not an elite player. He's also not the kind of a player that you would really expect to make many Pro Bowls, so that's what I'm calling tier 3. Tiers 1, 2, and 3, I feel good about being my starters. Anything less than that, I don't feel so good about being my starter. So right here for Damien Wilson, and we'll get more into him in a minute, I've got him as a tier 4 grade. What that means is I think this is a guy who can contribute. I think this is a guy who produces. I think this is a guy who's valuable to a football team. I'm not so sure that this is a guy that can just absolutely lock down the starting spot and you're happy that he's there at that starting spot. We'll talk more about that in a few minutes. And then, of course, tier 5, like with Passagnon, these are guys who are either way past their prime and are just kind of there on the football team to just kind of hold down the back end of the floor, or in Passagnon's case, I think he's still a project, somebody that you're still looking for contributions from, still hoping to develop. So that's my grading system. If you don't like any of these individual grades, that's fine. I'm not stuck to any of these. These aren't holy writ. This is basically just something so you can kind of get a feel for how the defense has developed at this point in the off season. So that's all the grades are about. I'm going to start right here in the secondary. Tyrann Mathieu is now the anchor of the secondary. Of course, most of you know that Eric Berry has been let go. Somewhere between the injuries and the relationship with the team was the reason they decided to let him go. I think a healthy Eric Berry is probably preferable to Tyrann Mathieu, but Eric Berry just hasn't been healthy in a very long time. Just can't seem to stay on the football field. So for that reason, the Chiefs have let him go. Tyrann Mathieu is now there. Tyrann Mathieu is what a real NFL starting safety looks like. Eric Berry was as well when he was healthy, but you're going to enjoy having Mathieu on the football field. The biggest reason that you're going to like having Mathieu on the football field, and there's two reasons, he's very flexible. He is stout against the run. You can pull him all the way down here in the box, and he loves getting up against the run. He's probably even better against the run than he is in pass coverage, but he's also very solid in pass coverage. And he's going to take a lot of pressure off the entire defense. He's going to help out the rest of your safeties just by his presence. He's going to take pressure off of your cornerbacks. He's going to take pressure off of your linebackers, and he's going to give your front four more time to get at the quarterback, whether it's through pure talent or scheming or whatever it is you want to do. Tyrann Mathieu is really going to help out this defense a lot. He's really going to bring a lot of production. He's going to bring a lot of value. He's going to bring just a lot of stability to the back end of that defense, and you're not going to be bleeding at safety like you were last year. These other four guys, I've got Murray, Lucas, Watts, and Sorensen. I've graded them all as a tier 4 player. The reason for that is I think all four of these players can contribute to different degrees. but I think none of the four would you really feel great about starting. So when I look over here at this other safety position, I don't feel great about Murray being my starter. I'm not even sure he is going to be the starter. Even if this is all the safeties they had, you may find Sorensen or Watts turning up to be the starter. I would really love to see Watts step up and be the starter. I'd love to see him develop at that point, considering you've already used, I think it's a 4th round draft pick on him, but we'll find out about that. I feel great about Sorensen being a backup. He's already started a lot of games for me in the Chiefs. I just don't really want him being my starter. Any of these guys here provide good depth for my team. They are contributors. I like having them there as my backups. I don't feel great about them being my starter, but I feel a whole lot better about having one starting safety spot kind of being filled by committee than I do last year when I had 2 starting safety spots being filled by committees. And right here, Tyrann Mathieu this year is going to absolutely, in all likelihood, lock up this spot and just really flourish and make this defense a whole lot healthier and a whole lot more balanced than it was over either of the past 2 seasons. So that is your safety position right there. When you look at the cornerback spot, still in the secondary, I like Bashaud Breeland. I like Kendall Fuller. I think they're both, when healthy, I think they're both very, very good starters. I think they lock down those starting positions. They're not elite. They're not Pro Bowl kind of starters, but they are very good starters. They're solid starters. Now, having said that, with Breeland, you got to find out if he's actually going to be healthy or not. You signed him to a very cheap deal, basically taking a flyer on him. So you're going to have to find out, is Breeland actually going to be able to be on the football field a lot this year? I think he only played in about 7 games last year, so he's coming off of an injury. You got to find out if he's actually going to be healthy. But when healthy, Breeland has proven over his first 4 or 5 seasons as a football player in the NFL, he's proven that he can be a very consistent starter and really produce. And that's what you're looking for whenever you've got some of these guys out here on the field that you know aren't lockdown guys. You're just looking for people who can produce, that you can count on and you can rely on, and you know when they step out in the football field, you know that they're going to give you a certain amount of production. That's what you're getting from Breeland. That's what you're getting from Fuller. I've got them both graded as Tier 3 players. I feel pretty good about both of them being starters. When I look at the overall cornerback position as opposed to last year, I really don't feel any better or worse about it. I think last year you were deeper. I think this year maybe you're a little more comfortable with these 2 guys being your starters. But with Scandrick being gone, I know a lot of you don't like Scandrick, but still he provided a lot of depth. Steven Nelson is gone. He signed a big contract with the Steelers. You don't have the depth right now, but like I said, this isn't a finished product for Brett Veach. He's got plenty more time, several more months to work on the depth here at cornerback. But I think as far as cornerback starters goes with Fuller and with Bashaud Breeland, I think you feel pretty safe about that with them being your starters. Nothing's ever guaranteed. We don't know for sure that Breeland's going to come back and be healthy, but you feel pretty good about that. When you move down here, and Charvarius Ward, of course, given a 5, I think we still have to see if he can develop and give any significant contributions. Linebacker. I'm going to start right here with Anthony Hitchens. I gave him a grade 3. I know a lot of you aren't going to like that because 2018 was a disaster. There's no other way to say it. It was an absolute disaster for Hitchens in his first year in Kansas City. I think, based on Spagnuolo's new defense that he's bringing in, based on the fact that Hitchens probably couldn't possibly be any worse, I think you're going to see Anthony Hitchens go back to being what he was during all of his time, his rookie contract in Dallas. And that was, for the most part, he was a starter. He was a consistent starter. Nobody was taking that starting spot away from him, and he produced at a very consistent level. I think that's what you're going to see from Hitchens this year. I think the Spagnuolo defense, the 4-3 under, I think it's really going to help all of the linebackers. I think the linebackers last year, I really felt like a lot of times they looked lost. I think they were uncomfortable in the defense. I think a lot of times they really felt like they just weren't in the right positions. I think this year, I think the positions for the linebacker spots for the 4-3 under, I think they're going to be more simple. I think they're going to be more clear. I think all 4 of the linebackers and whoever else the Chiefs bring on linebacker this year, I think they're going to feel a lot more comfortable in the Spagnuolo defense, and I think you're going to see their performance go up because of it. So I think Hitchens gets better. Let me go back over here to Damien Wilson. I know a lot of you are questioning why in the world I would give him a Tier 4 grade when, for 2 reasons, it looks like he's going to be basically guaranteed the starting spot. Let me contradict something I said here on an earlier video when I said that Damien Wilson wasn't guaranteed the starting spot. When you look at the depth at linebacker here for the Chiefs, there is hardly any depth at linebacker. So nobody's going to be taking this spot from Damien Wilson if he plays up to anything like we've seen at all. Now, the problem with Damien Wilson is he did not prove in Dallas. Unlike Hitchens, Damian Wilson did not prove in Dallas that he could hold down a starting spot. He's never held down a starting spot for any consistent length of time for different reasons. Now, I think he fits in the Spagnuolo defense. I think that the type of player that he is fits very well, but we just haven't seen that talent or that performance level kick in and produce the way we saw Hitchens do it when he was in Dallas, or the way we saw Breeland do it when he was in Green Bay. So I think what you're seeing here from Damian Wilson is, yes, he's capable, yes, he fits the defense, but we just need to see that he can actually hold down that starting spot and be a significant producer at that starting spot. So I don't feel bad about that necessarily, but that's why I didn't give him that tier 3 solid starter grade. Same thing over here, but look at these guys, Reggie Ragland and Dorian O'Daniel. Dorian O'Daniel last year was basically a football player without a position. When you look at the Spagnuolo defense and that weak side linebacker spot, it is perfect for Dorian O'Daniel. He's an athlete, he's fast, he has ball hawking skills, he's comfortable in space, he's good in coverage. At least that's what he was in college when he was an elite linebacker for the Clemson Tigers for most of the time that he was there. That's what the Chiefs are hoping he can be. We haven't seen that yet. Last year, he looked like he didn't have a position. He looked a little lost at times. He looked like he was still developing. He looked like he wasn't comfortable. I think he's going to benefit from this spot in the Spagnuolo defense. He's the guy that you would really like to see step up and grab that starting spot. But for now, we've just seen more out of Reggie Ragland over the years. We've just seen more contributions and more production. So that's why I have Ragland over the top of O'Daniel. But O'Daniel is really the guy that you would like to see. Let me say this really quickly before I hit the defensive line. When you start talking about people fitting a Spagnuolo defense or a 4-3 under defense or any kind of a defense, keep two things in mind. Number one, NFL defense is this way, even though most of them have a base defense that they work with. By and large, defenses today have to be very flexible. So the Chiefs defense, I don't even know what percentage of the time they're actually going to be in a 4-3 under this year. Teams have to play so much nickel, so much dime, even when they're not playing a lot of nickel and dime to go up against the 4 and 5 wide receiver spreads that a lot of NFL teams like to put out. Even just to try to trick the offensive coordinators and trick the quarterbacks, they have to morph into all kinds of different defenses. You simply cannot play the same defense from one week to the next, or even a lot of times from one play to the next. So these defenses have to be flexible. I think that's what you're going to see here. I think Tyrann Mathieu offers a lot of flexibility to the defense. I think Alex Okafor offers a lot of new flexibility to the defense. I think Breeland Speaks, if he can step up and develop and play, offers a ton of flexibility. Dorian O'Daniel, if he can step up and play, offers a ton of flexibility. So what you're seeing here from all of these defensive changes, you're seeing Brett Veach try to make the defense bigger, stronger against the run, younger, and one of the most important things I think is more flexible, where they can morph into different defenses. So when we talk about a player fitting into a certain defense, keep in mind, he's only playing that kind of a defense a certain percentage of the time. He really has to be flexible. Another thing to keep in mind too, a guy like Chris Jones. When you look at a guy like Chris Jones, he's a perfect fit for the under tackle in the 4-3 under defense that Spagnuolo is presumably going to bring. He is the absolute perfect fit, but Chris Jones is so good. He's such an elite player, he would fit any defense in the NFL. There's no defense that Chris Jones doesn't fit. He's the perfect ideal fit for the 4-3 under with Spagnuolo, but there's no defense that he doesn't fit. For conversely, when you look at Damian Wilson, who is a less talented player, and this is true of any less talented player, anytime you have a player who has less talent, he's going to just fit fewer defenses. So when you start to hear about people talking about, well, does he fit this defense or does he not? The better a player is, the more hardworking, the more intelligent, the more work they bring to the football field, the more defenses they fit. The less intelligent or the less talented or the less hardworking they are, the fewer defenses they fit. And so just keep that in mind when you're talking about people fitting the defense or not fitting it. Let's start with Chris Jones on the defensive line. He's an elite player. He will stay an elite player. I hope that the Chiefs can get him to sign a contract where that even in year 4 or 5 or 6, they still want to keep him. They're not looking at him like they look at Justin Houston or Eric Berry, trying to figure out how we're going to get out of this contract and this big cap hit. I would love to see them front load that contract and keep him for a very long time. I think he's the kind of player who can be an elite player for a very long time. So I'm going to move off of him. He's the elite guy there on the line. Defensive tackle, this would be more like the nose tackle position. Xavier Williams and Derek Nottie. I gave them grade 3s. I think if either one of these players were here, and the other one wasn't, I think Williams could lock down a starting spot and you'd feel good about it. I think Derek Nottie could lock down a starting spot and you would feel good about it. Williams is ahead of Nottie for two reasons. Number one, he's got more experience. Number two, he has a more well-rounded game. Derek Nottie at this point in his career, at least from what we saw last season, is really a run stopper, a run stopping specialist. And that's fine. That's what you want out of your nose tackle position. Derek Nottie would excel at that. He's a stout guy. He's a big guy. He's the kind of guy who could really hold that position down. But I think between Williams and Nottie and the two of them, you have a really great combo, both of whom fit that nose tackle position. Now, having said that, we're going to look at a whole lot of positions that the Chiefs could draft in here in a couple of weeks. One of the positions they really don't need is that interior defensive lineman position. They really don't need that. It's one of the few positions they really don't need on defense. Having said that, however, if somebody like Dexter Lawrence from Clemson, I don't know that Dexter Lawrence will drop that far in the draft. He may be drafted in the top 10. He may be drafted in the top 20 because of that drug test that he failed a few months ago. We don't really know where he's going to fall to. If somebody as talented and as big as Dexter Lawrence drops down to that late first-round spot where the Chiefs are picking, you grab him no matter what. What that will allow you to do is lock him into this spot here. Dexter Lawrence, theoretically, could be an unmovable force there at nose tackle. Combined with Chris Jones, you could have an absolutely unstoppable interior defensive line. So even though you don't need a nose tackle, if somebody like Dexter Lawrence or somebody of his ilk were to drop that low, and I don't know that he will, but if he was, you in a heartbeat would put him right in here. Nottie would then become your backup, and Xavier Williams' contract would just run out and you would just let Williams go. So that's where we would look at in the draft. But for right now, Williams and Nottie, we feel pretty good about that. I'm going to bounce back over here. Okafor, this is the guy you signed, got a very good deal, 3-year deal. The first year, I think, is $3 million cap hit. Seasons 2 and 3 is $7.1 and $7.9 million cap hit, backed up by Zombo. Zombo is a backup, and that's pretty much all Frank Zombo is at this point in his career, so I feel good about that. Okafor is a guy who was signed simply because not only is he a productive player, but he fits, ideally, he fits what they do at that strong side defensive end spot. That strong defensive end, some people call it a Leo, some people call it an elephant. There's all kinds of different positions that you could call it. I'm sorry, the Leo and the elephant actually go over there. But for right here, the Okafor at this strong side defensive end spot, this is not necessarily a guy who passes, who rushes the passer. He's capable of rushing the passer. We've seen him do that on occasion. But what you do see out of him is he's somebody who can hold the edge. He's strong against the run. And for Okafor, something that he can do is he can drop back into coverage. We haven't seen a lot of that, but we have seen some of that from him over the years. And for a defensive end, that's unusual. And that's something that Okafor can do. And I mentioned the flexibility that the NFL defenses have to have at this time of year when they're picking out players. Okafor is somebody who really offers a lot of flexibility. Out of a defensive end spot, he is very comfortable dropping off into coverage. Not an elite defender, no defensive end ever is, but Okafor is somebody who could do that. So Okafor is a really good value there. He's a fit for Spagnuolo's defense. I feel really good about that. Okafor is a guy who could really surprise and play well playing alongside Chris Jones. I think he could have a really good season right there. I think that's a very good free agency sign. And now, back over here to this spot, this is what I mistakenly refer to this as the Leo and the elephant. This is the Leo and the elephant. This is the guy right here. This is where I think you have a really big question mark on defense. This is the guy, this is the position that you really want to get after the quarterback. In that 4-3 under, this right here, and by the way, when you talk about a 4-3 under, there are a million different variations of every defense. A 4-3 under at times looks like a 3-4. Both of those defenses at times look like a 5-2 defense. There are a million variations on every defense, and those variations change based on what players you have and on what team you're playing every single week. So, but those are just generic things that we're talking about. This position generically is a heavy pass rushing position. It's the guy that you want getting after the quarterback every single down. His only other responsibility is to just keep an eye out for that running back. You want to chase that running back inside, but your job here is to chase the quarterback. The Chiefs don't really have anybody like that right now. They had two guys like that called Justin Houston and Dee Ford. You're going to hear stuff like Houston and Ford were let go because they don't fit the defense. And that, at the end of the day, that is really not the case. Justin Houston was let go because of age and because of a massive, massive cap number, the kind of cap number that is reserved really only for the elite players in the NFL. So that's why they let him go. They let Dee Ford go off of this because they just hadn't seen enough out of Dee Ford his first 4 seasons. Even though 2018 was an excellent vintage year for him, the first 4 seasons they just hadn't seen it. He had a pretty strong injury history. The production just wasn't there. They traded him away. They got good value for trading him away. They got the cap space and they got the second-round draft pick. So Ford or Houston, either one, whether or not you think they were an ideal fit for this position, Houston and Dee Ford could both do one thing and do it very well, and that is get after the passer. And that is the primary thing you need out of this position right here. So whether or not you think that he fits, Ford or Houston, either one could fit all the other demands of a defensive end right there in the 4-3 under. The one thing that position demands above all else is getting after the quarterback, rushing the quarterback, rushing the quarterback. There are other little things and duties that they have to do, but above all else, it's get after the quarterback, get after the quarterback. And Houston and Ford could do that. Now, having said that, I agree with the Chiefs getting rid of Houston and Ford because of money issues. The amount of money that Houston and Ford were going to command was so much that you wouldn't have been able to sign Tyrann Mathieu. You probably wouldn't have been able to sign Okafor. You wouldn't have had the cap space that you have right now to go out and get other people. So I'm glad that they got rid of them for those reasons, but it does leave a hole right here. This is a hole, and by the way, this is a place where you really just want your past defensive draft picks to step up. This is where the strength of your drafting really starts to show through. When you draft players, you don't necessarily need them to step up and be stars. You don't need them to step up and be elite necessarily like Chris Jones is, although that's icing on the cake. You do need them to step up and produce. Passignon is the guy who hasn't done that yet. You knew he was a project coming out of Villanova. Breland Speaks is the guy that you've kind of been changing his position with. Mostly played on the interior defensive line in college. Talked about moving him to linebacker last season. I don't know where else you're going to put him. If you put him at linebacker, I don't know who you're going to put out here at this defensive end position unless you draft somebody or put somebody in free agency. As the defense stands right now, with the players that you have at this moment, I don't know who else you're going to put out there but Breland Speaks. The only other option would be, and I really don't like this option, is if you were to put Chris Jones out here at the defensive end spot where you think he can get pressure on the quarterback, and you move Breland Speaks or Naughty or Williams and let them share those defensive tackle spots. Personally, I don't like that option, but that's something the Chiefs might do. I would much rather leave Chris Jones at this spot where he is a perfect natural fit and then try to figure out who I'm going to get pressure on the quarterback at this edge rushing spot. Is it Breland Speaks? I don't know. They talked about putting him at the linebacker spot, but I think Breland Speaks has the ability to get to the quarterback. I think this is something that they're going to look at. I don't know that he's going to start at this spot, but I put him there simply because he doesn't have another clear position at this point, and because the Chiefs at this point don't really have anybody else who is clearly that top edge rusher right there on this 4-3 under defense. So if you have somebody else that you want to plug in there, by all means let me know. This is just kind of where the dominoes fall for that particular spot right there. What about the draft? What are the Chiefs going to do in the draft? What do you think they ought to do in the draft for defense? If they were going to draft defense, you could pretty much go anywhere. I know a lot of people are going to be talking about edge rusher. You'd love to have another edge rusher in the draft. I don't know how many good edge rushers you're going to be able to get late in the first round and early in the second round. You're going to have some guys who have some edge rushing capability, but you're not going to have elite edge rushing capability at those particular spots. You could use depth right here at the linebacker spot. You could really love to see them draft at cornerback if you can find a cornerback at those late first round, early second round spots. There's a million different spots that the Chiefs could go with in the draft. I would love to see them go with a cornerback here at those positions if a good one opens up. I wouldn't blame Brett Veach for drafting anything other than a quarterback in this year's draft. He's got, I think, 4 picks out of the top 100 this year in that late first and that early to mid second round category, as long as a third round draft pick, I think it is. He's got a handful of draft picks that he can go through. There is no position that I would blame Brett Veach for drafting this offseason. No position at all other than the quarterback spot with Patrick Mahomes. Of course, he's locked up there. I think every other spot you could either add depth or you could just add what you really need a starter at that position. So when you talk about where the Chiefs are going to draft, you fill in the blank, that's a spot they could draft. I would love to see them draft a cornerback and try to kind of fill out that cornerback starting spot that they've struggled with for a few seasons now. What I would really love to see Is Eric Murray step up? Armani Watts step up? Breland Speaks step up? Dorian O'Daniel step up? Passan Jones step up? I would really love to see my draft picks from the past 2 or 3 seasons really start to step up and fill out some of these roles. That would take a lot of pressure off of me in this year's draft, but we'll take a look at that going forward. All right, so thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time. Have a great day. Goodbye.